Hey everybody, and welcome back. It's another episode of This Week in Cleantech. We bill it as a 15-minute roundup of the biggest stories in climate and clean energy, but I was just talking to my cohort, Mike Casey, off camera. I think it's about time we stop with that 15-minute billing. Maybe we call it an even 20 and just hope we can shoot for that, because both of us are just in a talking mood lately. The industry does facilitate it, let's be clear. Today is Friday, June 27th, 2025. My name is Paul Gerke. I'm the content director of FathomVerse, joined as always by Cleantech commentator Mike Casey of Tigercomm. We do have a guest on the horn, the esteemed Michael Grunwald, who wrote a piece for The Atlantic. Will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, Mike Casey, how are we feeling on this Friday?
I'm feistier than I'll get out,
oh,
Paul
boy.
Gerke. But first off, I don't think it's okay for you to blame our listeners for our verbosity. We got to take personal responsibility.
I just want to sell them the product that we are claiming to sell.
Okay.
If we say we're 15 minutes, if we come in at 17:50 and then 18:40 and 19:10.
Listen, I'm going to work on it. Look, I'm going to be. So I'll talk quick.
We're getting longer as we go.
First off, I'm going to give it. It's not in our top 5 stories, but I'm doing an honorable mention.
Honorable mention.
All right. Oh, Miriam Somerset Webb of Bloomberg, where are you? Because there's this inconvenient story from Reuters by Pietro Lombardi. It says Spain's grid operator blames power plants for blackouts despite miscalculations. Hey, Miriam, I know you jumped in and wrote that it's all solar's fault, the Iberian blackout, but it's not true. So, hey, I took the liberty of putting together a condiment selection for you to eat your words. Here's some ketchup. Here's some ranch dressing. Here's some pickle relish. Yeah, you can. I'll send you some words, and you tell me the condiment you want, and you get to eat them on camera. We'll have you on the show if you can do that, because you were wrong. Just be a big girl and admit it. All right, Mackinac Center as well. Can I go to our first story?
Yeah. Hey, I just want to say real quick, email me at my work address. Mike and I have been getting some personal emails lately that aren't exactly the most well put together. And you know what? Listen, I don't mind reading them, but that's where all of my garage door notifications and bills go. That I really can't consider your stories there. That's a separate inbox. Anyway, Mike, let's do the first story.
Right. Mr. Gerke. Our first story is by Yusuf Khan of the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. gave up its lead in clean energy sectors before. It might be doing it again.
Listen, I just want to say, no, the headline's a little soft for me, Mike, because there's no reason to say might be doing it again. If you've been reading anything about U.S. energy progress in comparison to China, you realize that we're probably 20 or 30 years behind pace if we get a foot up our ass now.
Yes.
And that's not going to happen. As you may know, U.S. has lost its leadership in everything. EVs, batteries, wind, nuclear, and it just is headed in the wrong direction as Trump cuts clean energy subsidies and shortens off-ramps potentially, depending on how the budget bill shakes out for some clean technologies. We could also lose a lead in clean hydrogen and carbon capture. It's all on the table. North America set to make 52% of the world's clean hydrogen by 2030. China on pace to make 30%. But did you see this thing earlier in the week, Mike? I don't want to get this wrong. China got 22 times more renewable energy generation onto its grid in 2 weeks than the state of California did in all of last year. I just want to throw that out. The scale at which they're building over there is preposterous. Carbon capture startups, by the way, in partnership with the DOE, have wanted to base their first-of-the-kind plants in the U.S. because of supportive policies, supposedly, or at least under the IRA. But now with the uncertainty of Trump tariffs and layoffs and factory opening delays, doesn't look like that's going to happen. Mike, what did you think of this piece?
I think our seemingly daily dose of stupid served by the Village Idiots National Convention known as Congress is racing to make the same blunder we made before, giving away our global leadership in energy sources that we developed. In the interest of getting us under 15 minutes, I'm going to basically say being a moron, it seems, has never been more in fashion. Paul, story number 2.
Story number 2, Matthew Zeitline from Heat Map News, fan of the show, and we're a fan of him, titled Blackouts, Brownouts, and Freaked Out Grid Operators, the Summer of Load has arrived. That's a winner of a headline I've ever heard of. One. Might be my favorite we've ever had on this show. What was in it, Mike?
Grid operators dealing with blackouts, brownouts, and high prices this week to the heat wave that has affected most of the eastern U.S. It's a good thing that global climate disruption is a hoax. A lot of changes are happening to our grid. Electricity demand is growing fast, driven by data center expansion, manufacturing growth, and electrification. Old fossil fuel plants are retiring. Solar and batteries are coming online, but present new challenges at times of peak demand. Navigating all of this during a heat wave is quite the feat. And PJM, the largest U.S. electricity market, nearly hits its all-time demand record on Monday with over 161 gigawatts used, and had to call on generators and transmission owners to defer or cancel maintenance so they could continue producing power. Demand response programs help during times of extreme heat. They pay for electricity users ahead of time to reduce their demand when the grid calls for it. But the good news, Paul, the ideology over reality crowd is convinced they pretend the global climate disruption crisis isn't happening, it will go away. If I pretend that foolish public servants will go away, will they, Paul?
That's the ostrich in the sand approach. Just bury your head in there and hope that when you come out, things are a little different. So I follow power market stuff as part of my job, and I don't always write about it, but it's good to know exactly what's going on. And you mentioned a few instances in the past week, but there's more to it than that even. So PJM, the crazy thing about 161 gigawatts or whatever their peak load was the other day is that's already more than they procured for their next auction, Mike. It was 160 gigawatts that they procured. So demand has already outpaced future projected load. In the biggest data center territory in the United States, that is a BFP, a big effing problem. You know who's not having BFPs right now, Mike? ERCOT and CIAISO. Damn it, I can't spell. ERCOT and CAISO. You know why? Because of batteries. Yes. It's incredible. The Cal ISO just the other night was saying that they had one of the largest dispatch from VPP batteries, and you could watch it. It immediately brought that peak load down. ERCOT is just laughing about not having to worry about these massive summer instances anymore. They said there's less than a 1% chance in most of Texas that there'll be an outage this summer caused by the heat because they've just been stacking batteries onto that grid. And they're more resilient now than they were last year. And last year was a major jump from the year before. Those grids have figured out how to make it work. And surprise, surprise, Mike Casey, it's with renewables.
Our third story, Kelsey Tamburino and Jesse Blazer from Politico, quote, throwing us off a cliff, end quote. Mega bill could derail hundreds of planned clean energy projects. I got to say, hat tip to our friend Jan Brandt at Solar Wake Up for this story.
Yeah, I'm writing a version of this right now very slowly, but Kelsey did a great job, and Jesse at Politico as well. The gist of this is that if Congress rolls back the IRA, Politico analysis indicates that 794 wind farms, solar plants, and battery storage facilities, as well as some other clean electricity generation projects that haven't started construction, would lose the two major tax breaks that they're building around, and they'd be put in jeopardy. 3 in 4 of the projects that would benefit from the tax credits happen to be in Republican districts, which paces with the data we've seen, about 3/4 beneficial to the red districts over blue. Many clean energy advocates are fighting to relax the Senate language. Others worry tax credits will add to the national debt. Other guys like TJ Rogers on the residential side with SunPower is happy to be rid of the government subsidy, the yoke that he feels like has been weighing down his sector for the longest time. Believes solar will survive without it. Mike, what did you think of the piece?
Okay, so bill would require clean energy projects to begin construction shortly after Labor Day if it passes July 4. It would also mean that projects must start operating by the end of 2028 to qualify for both tax incentives. But most projects won't be able to do that. And with growing electricity demand, we need new generation on the grid. Projects must also be, quote, placed in service, and quote, by December 31st, 2028, which is a problem for developers because interconnection and permitting delays are out of their control.
Yeah.
So 57 solar and wind projects report an operational date by the end of the year, but the remaining 569, that is another power of 10, don't know if they'll receive some or all of these tax credits. It's unclear how many projects will survive, but hey, you know, Paul, one thing we hear from readers all the time is there's just too many good paying jobs in America right now, so we got to get rid of some.
You know what this does, Mike, real quick before we move on? You know, it squeezes out the little guy, right? Because the big developers are able to stack projects. If you can get 100% of the ITC and PTCs for your project, if you have a shovel in the ground by December 31 at the end of this year, you can still get 100%. So the large developers can go ahead and start construction on these projects that they don't know if they're going to be interconnected within the next 3 or 4 years. But as long as they start construction, they can make sure that they've got a pipeline that gets through this administration and into the next one. You know who can't do that are the smaller developers who are now more at risk, less likely to be able to borrow money, and we're going to lose out as a result. Story number 4. Ryan December and Jennifer Hiller from the Wall Street Journal. New York to build one of the first U.S. nuclear power plants in generation. Big story this week, Mike.
Yes, the state is aiming to begin building the first major new U.S. nuke in more than 15 years. Only 5 new U.S. commercial reactors have come online since 1991, which hasn't been enough to offset plant retirements. The governor has directed the state's public electric utility to add at least 1 gigawatt of new nuclear capacity, enough to power about 1 million homes. She is a major proponent of the nuclear build-out, Governor Hochul. She's advocated for changes to the federal permitting process for nuclear plants and even asked DOGE to focus on streamlining operations for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Paul?
Did you see that Big Balls is no longer in government? The 19-year-old scapegoat of Doge that went by the name Big. I'm just saying what his name was.
I think we're going to get Mendez to cut that.
That could have been on his birth certificate. No, that's what his name was. I won't say it again, but it's in MSNBC, it's in CNN. It's just what he went by. Anyway, he's not there anymore, so I don't know what you're leaning on with Doge. The concern with nuclear, Mike, has always been about safety. But there's been local support around Microsoft's plan to restart 3 Mile Island, and that would suggest that sentiment has changed, which is good news for this New York plant. And listen, the project could help launch the long-awaited era of new U.S. reactor construction. You have to build 1 before you can build 5 or 10. And scale and cost per megawatt are obviously the big concerns here. We'll see what happens, Mike. A nuclear renaissance in the United States, to me, is still a dream until we can see it, we can touch it, we can feel it, and there are electrons going into the grid. Story number 5.
And we have a place to put the waste that'll last for 10,000 years. Hey,
Planet B. We'll just shoot it up there. It'll catch orbit.
Story number 5 by Michael Grunwald. Writing in The Atlantic, humanity can quit fossil fuels, but not food. Michael Grunwald, welcome to the show. We have talked about having you on for a long time. Welcome. We want people to read the story. We want people to read your book. If they have not done so yet, can you give them the teaser bottom line?
Sure. Well, the book's called We Are Eating the Earth. And the idea is that 2/3 of our climate problem is an energy problem, and you guys do an awesome job talking about that every week. And that used to be how I spent my time thinking. But the other third is food, and it gets about 3% of climate finance and like 0% of climate conversation. So that's why I wrote We Are Eating the Earth. Agriculture is eating the earth. 2 of every 5 acres of this planet are now cropped or grazed, while like 1% is cities and suburbs. And so, essentially, I always say that trying to decarbonize the planet while we're continuing to tear down a tropical forest to about a soccer field worth every 6 seconds, it's like trying to clean your house while you're smashing the vacuum cleaner to bits in the living room, right? You're making a huge mess. You're knocking all that carbon into the air, and you're crippling your ability to clean up the mess in the future. Because remember, our forests are already soaking up about 1/4 of our fossil fuel emissions. So, it's no bueno. And even for energy people, I think you got to at least think about this stuff a little bit.
There's, I feel like a sentiment, the temperature may be rising in the room a little bit. I just had a conversation with some folks from the American Farm Trust and some developers who work in the dual use side of things, the agrivoltaics, land use for solar production and for livestock. And they were saying that the fears that you hear about too much of America's good crop producing land being eaten up are actually legitimate. Like you don't conflate them too much with the NIMBYism and the people who are worried about right of ways. There are legitimate concerns in middle America for farmers who are worried that like they're not going to be able to produce crops the way they used to very soon, and their margins are a lot smaller than they used to be. Mike, what do we do about that? And have you heard similar sentiment in your reporting?
Well, what I'd start with is that we use 40 million acres of Middle America to grow corn for ethanol. And an acre of solar panels provides about 100 times as much energy as an acre of ethanol. So if you really, if the people are complaining about those solar and wind projects that are being banned on farmland throughout rural America, if they were really concerned about that, maybe start by getting rid of this ethanol bomb. And again, ethanol, which is a climate disaster, it's eating about a Texas worth of the earth, but livestock are eating 50 Texas's worth of the earth, and
Iowa's a food desert,
75.
Mike. Yeah.
So I think there are bigger problems than using a little bit of farmland to produce a lot of energy with solar and wind. And again, for a lot of farmers, that's a really good, it's a good source of income. I did quote a farmer who calls their wind turbines the second wife, right? Because it's bringing in the extra income for the family.
It got to be dual income these days.
Mr. Gerke, I would like it noted, and I would like some credit for setting up our guest with my condiment tray. See, I introduced food early in the show because it set Mike Grunwald up for this topic.
That was my master plan. What's on that tray? Ranch, ketchup? Are these your favorite condiments or just ones you found?
I'm not going to comment on that. It's a prop. You brought no prop. I brought a prop, and I think it enlivens the show. Now,
well, as long as you're not putting it on beef, because beef is the baddie, right? It's like if you're gonna the one thing if you care about your personal diet, its effect on the climate, eat less beef, because it's like 10 times worse for the climate and the planet than chicken or pork, which of course are not as good as beef or lentils. But I think perfect usually isn't on the menu. Better is better than worse. So I don't want to see that ketchup, going on a burger unless it's an Impossible Burger.
And I want to I do feel required to point out that if one compares the loss of arable farmland to suburban sprawl compared to what would be required to meet our energy needs for renewables, it's not even close. So this idea like we somehow can't help family farmers stay on their land by incorporating harvesting wind and the sun to bolster their income and to keep rural communities rural and farming is ridiculous. It's a complete red herring. Mike,
I was just going to say one thing I point out at the end is since I write about dozens of possible food and land solutions, both on the demand side and the supply side, so sort of better diets and better farming. But one thing one point is that none of them have much traction yet, and they're all going to take time. So the number one thing that we should do is start decarbonizing farming through like putting solar panels on their barns, putting more wind turbines in their fields. That's a way that we can accelerate the green energy transition and at least buy a little time to try to figure out what we need to do. Because as you know, with energy, right, it's like it's not that mysterious anymore. We kind of need to electrify the global economy and run it on clean electricity, and we're actually starting to do that. With, as you guys talk about every week, with some bumps. Food, we barely know what to do. That's why I wrote this book, and we've gotten nowhere. We're making no progress. So it's sort of like energy was 20 years ago, where there really weren't alternatives to fossil fuels. And so I'm kind of saying, hey, we got to accelerate this energy stuff so that we can at least figure out what we need to do on food.
Paul, last question.
Take it away, Mike. You had started one there. I don't want to eat when you're hungry.
I'll just say, Mike, a parting thought on the interplay of energy sources and food, because I think that's one of the things you've talked about in the many ways you've written about this book. But I think that's, if you have a parting thought for our listeners.
Well, I guess I would say that biofuels is a good example, and biomass power is a good example where energy people have kind of said, oh, God, we got to replace fossil fuels. And they've sort of used the land sector and the food sector to solve their problems without really thinking about the impact on the food and land sector. And they turn out to be, basically biomass power, burning trees for electricity is worse than burning coal. And, burning corn or soybeans in your engine is worse than burning gasoline. We're going to need better solutions than that. And I do think a lot of people who don't know squat about agriculture, and I remember I was one of them until I started working on this book. There's a real, they see this opportunity to kind of offload energy's problems onto food. And it's a bad idea. We're going to need to solve the energy problems in the energy world, and food's got to solve some problems too.
Well put. Paul, we're just about out of time. We need to go to our Cleantecher of the Week.
Let's do it. Cleantecher of the Week this week is Kakani Katija, creator of the gaming app FathomVerse. This summer, Katija's team plans to test an AI underwater robot that will search for specific marine species and collect data. The goal here is to deploy a fleet of underwater AI-enabled drones constantly monitoring marine life to gain insight into the ocean's impact on global climate. Congratulations, Kakani, our Cleantecher of the Week.
We want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, Alex Peterson, and Claire Quirin for helping gather these stories.
And thanks for the great conversation, Other Mike, and for carrying us well over the 20-minute mark on This Week in Clean Tech, just like I predicted. But I think it's a good show. Let us know what you think. Leave some feedback, subscribe if you dig it, share your story suggestions for next time. You'll find all the articles we discussed today, including Mr. Grunwald's, included in the post here on Factor This.
Take care.